I've been debating for the last 24 hours whether or not to make this video, and I decided that I'm going to because I have very, 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 very few subscribers, and I don't know that anyone will ever really see this video, but I figured if at least one hardcore CM Punk fan does, and it pisses him off, and I get a cranky comment or something, it'll kind of be worth it. So 24 hours ago, I was in a gas station with my girlfriend, and I happened to look down at my phone while we're waiting in line on Facebook, and I see that CM Punk has been fired from AEW. And I've never been so happy at somebody else's termination. Not because I want to see the man financially crumble, I wouldn't wish that on him, but because the dude does not belong in the wrestling business anymore. I'm going to go into detail about my opinions on CM Punk here because I see a lot of people defending him. I see a lot of people completely tearing him apart, siding with one side despite not knowing the full story, because nobody knows the full story of the recent events, of the events from Brawl Out, I think it was last year, or a lot of things involving CM Punk. And I just want to give this little disclaimer here that I don't like CM Punk at all. I don't like AEW at all. I do not like the Young Bucks at all. I do not like Jungle Boy at all. And I liked Kenny Omega in New Japan, but I don't really care for him now. I don't really like any of the parties involved. And you could say, oh, well, then it's not your business to give an opinion. Well, theoretically, it's none of our business, but in a way, it's everyone's business as fans of the product. So again, you can go back and forth with that conversation, and really, it's going to get you nowhere. But I at least want to make this video because I think it could be fun and something fun to look back on in a couple years, especially if I'm completely wrong about my assessment. Oh well, September 3rd, 2023. It's 6:23 p.m. So we'll see how this holds up. So, we're going to go way back with Punk and my thoughts on him. I was a fan of his I started watching wrestling in 2007. I was a fan of his in 2008 when he cashed in. 2009, he turned heel. I mean, I wasn't a fan of him then because I was a young kid and blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't really have that much of an interest in CM Punk. His feud with Hardy was pretty good, though. Nothing of note really happened in 2010. 2011, of course, the pipe bomb happens, which this is the first, I guess, hot take I have about Punk is I don't think that pipe bomb is that good. Me personally, I felt it was kind of like somebody on Newgrounds, which was real popular at the time, some young kid on Newgrounds just having no filter and saying whatever edgy thing he could think of. I really didn't think it was that great of a promo because also I think it started the very, very, very annoying trend of shoot promos, despite there being several shoot promos beforehand, mainly from Paul Heyman, that were better shoot promos, in my opinion. I find the promo just an attempt to be edgy and bring realism to it. And I'm not saying it's a bad promo. It is a good, solid, smooth sound promo. And I think was really good for the short term, but really in the grand scheme of things wasn't that great, and like I said, spawned tons of work shoot promos, which to me basically says we can't give you a story interesting enough to captivate you, so we're going to blur the lines, which is the most Vince Russo thing I have seen in WWE since 1999, and that is saying something. So he does a pipe bomb, gets a nice push, has a great match at Money in the Bank. They do screw up the Summer of Punk fairly badly. He has a year-long title reign, which actually I want to talk about briefly, because everybody says how he should have main evented all these shows. And I'm not saying that some of the main events we got were any good. For example, John Cena versus John Laurinaitis, while I personally enjoyed it because I found it funny, is not a good main event. John Cena versus The Big Show, I do not hate that match. I remember as a 12 or 13-year-old actually enjoying it because I was a fan of The Big Show. But again, something like that, main eventing a show in 2012, did not make too many people happy. Obviously, Brock Cena, Rock Cena, the Rumble stuff, Brock Triple H, I mean, it was the first time ever. Stuff like that makes sense. But part of the reason that Punk didn't main event these shows is because he wasn't a big enough draw. And I actually want to take my numbers from something I read a long time ago. So, SummerSlam 2009, 10, and 12 outdrew 2011. All right? This is assuming what the videos on it I watched were right. They were from, I think it was What Culture's SummerSlam Facts from back in the day, back in like 2017. SummerSlam 2009 did however much it did. 2010 dropped, I believe, a bit, I think, and that could be wrong. I do apologize. I'll check. Yeah, SummerSlam 2010 dropped a bit from 2009. However, it dropped over 50,000 from what I just read from 2010 to 2011. The big change of that was CM Punk in the main event. Then, the following year, it goes up 50,000, almost 60,000, because Brock Lesnar main events the show and is the featured player on the card. And I'm not sitting here saying that, like, I mean, you could say, well, what if CM Punk main evented? Would you give him that credit? But no, or maybe. But the reason I originally said no is because you think about it, you have guys like Triple H and Shawn Michaels on 2009, Cena and Orton. Jeff Hardy and CM Punk did have a big feud. 2010, you have the Nexus feud, which up until the end of that match was really hot. You have 2011, which is the Summer of Punk. I mean, he's kind of the focal point here. Summer of Punk. He comes back from his 8-day vacation that he did after leaving Money in the Bank as champion. And the buy rates drop. And then the following year, Brock Lesnar comes back and is in this big feud with Triple H. And that pulls an extra, 60,000 buys. Now, I know illegal streaming services were big around the time. I remember hearing about that. I know a lot of people, pinpoint that as one of the reasons the buy rates were dropping, that and the fact that just wrestling was not popular at all. But the bottom line is, Punk is the focal point of 2011, and the buy rates were the worst. I mean, even if you go, we're going to check 2013 here, they were right around the same, 2013 and 2011. So, and I mean, the network was after that, so. Point is, he wasn't the draw. So he drops the belt. He does not main event WrestleMania 29, which, I mean, personally, I get it. I was not looking forward to another Cena Rock match, but at the same time, I think they viewed it that CM Punk didn't belong in the ring with those two in the main event of WrestleMania, which, my opinion, yeah, that's pretty accurate, though the match, again, did suck, and Punk and Undertaker had the best match of the card. I agree with that. Leading into WrestleMania 30, there was no chance he main events. He up and quits. I understand some of the issues he would have had, the fact he was injured and they didn't give a shit about him. I get that problem. I completely understand that. If that was the big gripe that he had, I would completely understand. But the big gripe was the fact he didn't main event WrestleMania because he wasn't worthy of main eventing WrestleMania. Now, again, I want to also say that guys like The Miz main evented WrestleMania at one point, and he had absolutely no business, especially at that point main eventing WrestleMania. So CM Punk being pissed off that The Miz main evented WrestleMania over him, I understand that because CM Punk is a better wrestler than The Miz, or at least at the time he was. Certainly not now, and I'm no Miz fan. But, yeah, I understand being mad that someone like that main events WrestleMania over you, but when it's Cena and The Rock, and soon to be Brock Lesnar again, and The Undertaker a couple years prior, and these huge crossover stars or massive wrestling stars are main eventing WrestleMania over you because they are a bigger draw, because it brings in the casual fans, which CM Punk does not do, which we'll get into that here in a minute. I can't process that because CM Punk is not on the level of those guys. He's not. I mean, I understand if you are a fan of CM Punk, I get it. I'm not sitting here saying that you were wrong or you are stupid for being a fan of him. That's your opinion. You're right to have that opinion. This is just the way I'm viewing the situation back in 2014 and all that in 2011. And my opinion is he had no business complaining about not main eventing WrestleMania because he didn't have business being in the main event of WrestleMania. So now that we've got that out of the way, fast forward to 2021. He debuts for AEW, and again, I'm not a Punk fan. Debut, great. I was a fan for a little bit. I'm like, it seems like he's changed. Seems like he's not as full of himself. The debut was excellent. It was great. And of course, Adam Cole and Daniel Bryan, who, again, not a huge fan of, debuted shortly thereafter for AEW. So I watched a little bit of AEW around that time. It didn't last long, but, I saw Punk was back and he had the little mini feud with Darby Allin. I watched that match. He had a feud with MJF, which I heard was really good. I wouldn't mind watching their dog collar match one day. Then he gets into a feud with Adam Page, and if I remember right, there were some minor issues prior to Brawl Out. I know he has the match at Double or Nothing with Adam Page, and he beats him and got hurt. So he had to take time off, so they do the whole interim champion thing with Moxley, and then Moxley has a match with Punk where Moxley squashes him, and then, if I remember, and again, I don't watch AEW, and I did not do research for this, because I don't need to do research for my opinion here. I do understand why in a minute. But Moxley beats him in the squash, and then Punk beats him at the show, which, sure, okay, that works. So then Brawl Out happens. Now, who is at fault, who's not? From what I read, and it is limited, is Punk made comments about Page, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega got pissed. The big fight broke out between Punk and, I think, Ace Steel and the other three. Big brawl happens. Everyone gets suspended. I want to say Ace Steel got fired, but I'm not entirely sure if that's accurate. Punk also got hurt either in the match with Moxley or in the brawl. I've heard it was the match. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, this major issue erupts. And this really split AEW fans, because going into this, basically, if you were an AEW fan, you were an avid AEW fan. AEW fans, I don't want to say we're like ECW fans, because nothing is like an ECW fan, but they were very much territorial to their stuff. Well, of course, AEW brings over the CM Punk fans, which I do want to bring this to my next point here as to why I don't think Punk was such a huge draw. People say Punk is a big draw. Some people said he's the biggest draw in AEW history, and that is a monumental joke. If you want to say by the way that they booked him and the fact that he was gone for so many years, you'll have an argument, but to say he's the biggest star they have is ridiculous. You have Bryan Danielson, who again, not a huge fan of, but you have Bryan Danielson. You have Chris Jericho, who could legitimately be labeled as one of the greatest of all time. You have Sting, who is an for real living wrestling icon. There are other guys they have that have been a big name elsewhere. And I'm not going to say there's a ton of guys that are bigger than Punk just because of everything he did do in the WWE, which also I want to point out here that the WWE did make CM Punk the star he was. It seems like people do forget that detail. But Punk isn't the biggest draw that AEW, or at least he's not the biggest star that AEW has. He may be one of the bigger draws in terms of where he's at in his career because Jericho's older, Sting's older. Okay, fair enough. But the biggest star they've ever had? No. Punk brought the Punk fans back. The lapsed Punk fans that gave up. That is who he brought back. And I'm also not sitting here saying that not a single lapsed fan who stopped watching wrestling for anywhere from months to years to all the way to back when the Monday Night Wars ended came back. I'm not saying a single fan didn't come back. I know some people on YouTube say, oh, well, Punk is what brought me back. I'm not sitting here saying he brought nobody back, because I'm looking here. Over the Limit did 140,000 buys. Capital Punishment did 170,000, which is kind of strange. Money in the Bank does do 195,000 buys. Okay, that's not too bad. So, okay, some people did come back from Punk. Night of Champions, he faces Triple H, 161,000. So, my point I'm making here is Punk did not bring a ton of people back. While Brock did, Brock brought some old fans back, some UFC fans. Rock brought some Attitude Era fans, some Lapsed fans, movies fans, just fans in general of Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. The Undertaker always brought fans back whenever he came around. Even Triple H brings back some of the old Attitude Era fans. This is why these guys were main eventing over Punk. So, again, for people to treat him as the biggest star that AEW's ever had is just wrong. So, Brawl Out happens, and again, that's the reason I bring that up now is because of the way he's treated going forward. I don't know who was right or wrong in Brawl Out. Personally, I don't care, because the bottom line is, in a professional wrestling business, this isn't the 80s or 90s. That shit shouldn't happen. Now, I understand you have a bunch of athletes who go out there and have these wrestling matches. So eventually something could boil over. I get that. But to have 4 of your biggest names in that shouldn't happen. And I know Punk made some comments. And to be quite honest with you, if what the comments Punk made was the triggering point for these guys to go defend their friend, I don't necessarily see the problem on the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega's end. I've heard him say that Adam Page was reckless. I don't know. I've watched one Adam Page match. Yeah, I was gonna say I watched a couple. I only watched one. I don't see him as that good, but maybe things got improved. I heard he had some really good matches. I heard he was pretty safe. I mean, safe enough they put the title on him. I heard he had a great match with Kenny Omega. Did he hurt him? I don't know. But Punk gets suspended. The Young Bucks get suspended. Kenny Omega gets suspended. And it looks like Punk is not coming back. And at some point before he does, he goes to Raw and gets told by Vince McMahon, or at least Vince McMahon's security, who was told by Vince McMahon, to get out. So, goes to show he's not welcome there. So eventually, just a couple months ago at this point, Punk does come back on his own show. They made a show for CM Punk, this 45-year-old has-been. Maybe 44. They make a show for him. Then it comes out that there are people he doesn't want on the show because they said bad things about him. Like I know Matt Hardy did, and I know he got into it with Dolph Ziggler's brother, who I don't even know if he's on the AEW roster, but I know he don't like him. And the Young Bucks can't be there, and Kenny Omega can't be on there. And this person can't be on there, and that person can't be on there. And it's just constantly you're hearing about how this guy wants Collision about himself. And I'm not sitting here saying that he demands to be champion, but he wants this wrestling world of Collision to be wrapped around him. And you look back at the things, of him complaining in the pipe bomb and complaining about the WrestleMania main event and complaining about Adam Page and complaining about this and pissing, moaning, whining, complaining. And you see the problem is CM Punk, that he's the issue. I'm not saying that AEW is a well-run company. I think AEW sucks. I think there's talent there. I think there's a ton of talent, but I think its presentation, the way it is shown, the way it is presented is awful. But for him to sit here and say that he works with children when he's being a giant crybaby, using the stroke he has with the boss that wanted him from day one, apparently over Chris Jericho even, is ridiculous. Because at least take a guy like Hogan. He did it to position himself on top. This guy is just using his pull to have his own show built around him, and certain people can't show up. Certain people can't be on Collision, which kills certain dream matches in the dirt. So this goes on, and then he gets into it with Jungle Boy, right? And there's probably things I'm missing. And again, if I am, I do apologize. They have, I think, something prior to All In last weekend. Well, apparently there was a spot where they were going to use glass, and that Jungle Boy wanted to use real glass. Punk said, no, you shouldn't. Which, if that is the case, by the way, I want to just kindly point out, it's Jungle Boy's match, not yours. I've also heard that Punk tried telling a lot of these guys how to wrestle, which I understand that in terms of a safety reason, because a lot of these guys are not safe. But I also think that's just what these fans like, is that type of offense. I mean, the AEW fans like that high-end, I will try to say this as nicely as I can, high-end, no-selling, non-stop action type of wrestling. That's what they like. That's what they want to see. I mean, that's what got big in the indies the last 15 years. It was something different. And obviously with that, you saw things with glass and these brutal spots. Well, Jungle Boy makes a comment about it during his match, and then they get into a fight backstage, him and Punk. And supposedly Punk beat him up, because every story I hear from a Punk fan is Punk beats up everybody. I heard somebody say he took on Omega and the Young Bucks by himself and beat them. I don't believe that for a single second, because I don't believe CM Punk is that tough of a guy. Yes, I know he has some former UFC training, but I also don't see where beating up the Young Bucks or Kenny Omega, surely I don't believe he did it at one time, is that much of a feat. Or beating up Jungle Boy, who, from my understanding, is a celebrity's son who has sadly passed away. So these are not guys who, and I'm not sitting here saying that they aren't tough, but I'm saying he has some UFC experience, or at least some fighting experience. These guys have no real reason to be quote-unquote fighters, which is why in WWE, you backpedal all the way back to 2014, he wasn't doing things like that. He briefly mouthed off to The Undertaker, and Undertaker used his pull to place him down the card. And if Undertaker decided to, he would have beat Punk's ass. He didn't mouth off to Brock Lesnar. He didn't mouth off to The Rock or John Cena or, Triple H or Kane or any of these legends, these huge names that they had at the time. Or even a guy like Dolph or Del Rio, who's a scumbag in himself, because he would have got his ass beat by these guys. He's mouthing off the guys he knows. He's a bully, basically. So, supposedly Punk lunged at Jungle Boy and choked him, and then he said, I hate this place. And now there's talk that there may have even been something behind closed doors. And I don't know who was right, who was wrong. But the bottom line is, this is another Punk problem. Another one. So even if Jungle Boy's in the wrong, number one, it's hard to believe that he's completely in the wrong when CM Punk, again, is involved with the drama, because it seems to be the common theme of his career. Number two, if Punk is causing that much problems for the boss, and again, I don't personally think Tony Khan really knows what he's doing, but if he's making that much of an issue for the boss, and apparently got up in his face and said how much he hates his place, and made Tony Khan feel uncomfortable, which a lot of people are dogging on him for that. I mean, this dude's like probably a $105 soaking wet. So even someone like Punk getting in his face, yeah. And again, he is a billionaire. He's probably the son of a billionaire. He's probably never had confrontation a day in his life. So he fires Punk because of Punk's attitude and the way he was. And people are still defending Punk, despite him crying like a baby in 2011, walking out on all of his fans in 2014, bailed out of a show, walked out, quit, didn't give everyone an explanation until, I think, November that year on the Colt Cabana podcast, goes to UFC, bombs, goes to AEW, causes a huge rift in the upper echelons of, the hierarchy in AEW, gets suspended, comes back, gets suspended again, and then gets fired. And all the while had drama, talked down about people, this, that, and the other thing, and people still defend Punk. And people now want to see him, some people want to see him go back to him. I also want to say, I know not every CM Punk fan is like this. If you're a CM Punk fan and you're a rational thinker, good for you. If you're still a fan of his work, there's no harm in being a fan of his work. There are people still a fan of Chris Benoit's work. There are still fans of those people. That's not what I'm trying to call people out on. That's not why I'm trying to make this video. You can be a fan of the guy's work. You can think he's in the right. You can look at the research and make your opinion. Just like I'm making this video. I'm a nobody on YouTube making this fourth YouTube video for his channel. You don't have to believe what the hell I'm saying. You can think I'm wrong. But my opinion is the fact that even if Jungle Boy was in the wrong, and Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks were in the wrong, and Tony Khan may not know what he's doing, and maybe he did have a legitimate gripe, with his pipe bomb, you see the cycle continuing with CM Punk being a problem. He's been a problem for many, many years, and he continues to be one. He should not go back to WWE. I don't think they'll take him. People say, oh, they've forgiven people. That's because half the time they were in the wrong. The Ultimate Warrior, while he was his own problem in a video that maybe I'll do one day, they released a DVD trying to desecrate his legacy. Bret Hart, they screwed. Bruno Sammartino just hated the way wrestling became. There's Randy Savage. I mean, they demoted him to commentary. Meanwhile, he still wanted to wrestle and was still a draw. And then brought the Slim Jim deal to WCW. I mean, in majority of these situations, WWE was in the wrong more often than not, especially with a guy like Bret. Then you look at, you could say, what about CM Punk being injured? Well, they were in the wrong there. Okay, yeah, they were. But then you add in everything he's done with this other company. You have a guy like Seth Rollins coming out and saying he's a cancer. You have other guys coming out and just dogging on him. You even had a rumor going around saying it's their, with the people in WWE supposedly saying it's their headache now. And people want to see this guy come back and go against Roman Reigns and maybe beat him for a title he's had for 3 years? No. Punk needs to be retired. He really does. He's past his prime. He's injury prone. He is an over-dramatic freak who causes a problem with every situation he's handed. And at this point has no massive value to the wrestling business besides those fans who are still hardcore CM Punk fans. And I know, again, if one of them sees this, I'm still a fan of his. That's cool. But in my opinion, this man needs to be done. And WWE, for their own sake, should never give him another chance. He goes in the Hall of Fame 15 years from now. Cool. Cool. He's not a wrestler anymore. He's done. You know. And that's 15 years from now, but the very same may be said for right now, is that he's done. I don't know. Maybe he will. Maybe things, are different. But all I know is I was toying with making this video somewhat even beforehand. And then I found out he's fired. So now AEW wants nothing to do with him. WWE, who he walked out on and has proven that he's still a problem, will likely want nothing to do with him. And again, maybe this is one of those things at the beginning of the video I talked about that will not stand up well in due time. I don't know. But my opinion personally is CM Punk is a problem. I think he's one of the most overrated wrestlers, or honestly, of all time. Because even in his prime, I didn't see the main event appeal that a lot of people did. Again, he had good matches with Brock, Triple H, Cena, Taker, Daniel Bryan. Don't get me wrong, Jeff Hardy. But I don't see where he was this mammoth draw, especially when you look at the ratings and the buy rates at the time. Again, he was huge with his Chicago fans and his fans who wanted something different and something more reality-based and, kind of a fleeting glimpse of the Attitude Era, though I don't personally think he could touch that because, again, most of his stuff were just work-shoot promos. And, again, they sounded like an edgy Newgrounds kid, in my opinion. I get being a fan of his, at least what was presented to you on screen, but I really don't see how anyone can defend him again when almost every single time that there was an issue with him, he was at least to blame somewhat, if not more, and he was the culprit. I really don't see how anybody can defend him. So that's just my opinion. This video has already gone on longer than I expected, but I personally just hope he just slowly goes away into retirement. And again, like I said, if he gets a Hall of Fame induction 10, 15 years down the line, cool. It's really the best I can say, because it's a mess, and it's just a black mark on AEW's career, AEW's run. It's a black mark on wrestling right now, which, considering the last couple of weeks, is not what wrestling needed. It needed some good after these last couple of weeks, and this was not it. And I heard the show that AEW had was really good. Again, I didn't watch it. I watch AEW. But the fact they sold 80,000 plus tickets, great job to them. I think people should be a little more, at least, what the hell's the word? I think they should be more supportive of that because that is something really impressive. Do I think that this is, their ticket to becoming a competitor to WWE? No, because I think that time's already passed. And, credit to them. And hopefully they keep chugging along with whatever they got, and they keep going strong and doing and entertaining their fans. I'm going to stick with the WWE, which even then I don't watch all their stuff. I did not watch Payback because I was tired. But with that being said, this was my complaint about CM Punk, and I hope you enjoyed. If you didn't, my bad. But yeah, I will make another video soon. Not quite sure what. I was actually toying with making one on Brock Lesnar ending the streak, because I kind of have my own opinions on that one, but then this whole mess came up, so I made this. Maybe that'll be the next one. Maybe it won't. I'm not sure. But I enjoyed this video. Hope you did too. Have a good one.